everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and it's time to bring out the fiber reactive dyes because we are going to dye some 100% cotton yarn and a cotton wool blend, both with the same type of dye. There have been many times when I've dyed a 50-50 wool, cotton, or other cellulose fiber blend with acid dyes, but what happens if I dye it with fiber reactive dyes? Now, this is something that we have done once in the past. I did an experiment with a wool cotton blend and dyed it with acid dyes, using fiber reactive dyes as acid dyes, and then as the fiber reactive dye, and we got a beautiful heathered yarn. It was just slightly rougher to the touch, but I thought that it would be fun to just have cotton and cotton wool blend, and then we'll see side by side what we end up with. I haven't decided if we're gonna kettle dye or hand paint or what, but it's Sunday and I want to film this tomorrow, so I'm gonna go ahead and pre-soak our yarn, but first we'll take a closer look. The two Knit Picks yarn bases we are gonna dye today are woolen cotton, which is a 50% merino wool, 50% cotton. And then for our 100% cotton yarn, I have this cotton boucle, which is 100% cotton. It does have a thinner ply and a thicker ply, so construction-wise, the yarns are a little bit different from one another, but that's okay. So I'm gonna go put on some removable nylon zip ties onto this yarn and pre-soak it in just plain tap water overnight. And then tomorrow I'll set up a soda ash dye bath to soak them in a little bit before we start dyeing the yarn. It is the next morning, and here we have our woolen cotton, our cotton boucle, and then I also have a skein of cotton in here that I'm probably gonna use on another video. But check out this water. That is like yellow. Now, I don't know which one of these yarn bases did that, but there's something in there, and I still have yet to like try to scour yarn before I dye it, which is like washing it with soap. But yeah, I don't know when I should be doing that. I'm not planning on using soap, but let's drain this water because I mean, I don't know. This is something that I've seen before, and I definitely see, like, from some, like, alpaca yarns and stuff, the water can be cloudy after the initial pre-soak. But I have no idea what's getting rinsed out of the yarn or which yarn base it's coming from. You can see that there is more. And so this is just important to keep in mind for later on when we go and wash our yarn. Oh my goodness. But I'm actually going to take that Lindy chain yarn, which again, I don't know if I said the percentages. This is 70% cotton, 30% linen, and set it aside because the only reason why I'm even talking about that yarn for this video is that I pre-soaked it in here, and so I don't know if the yellow, who that came from. But we now need to add some soda ash, and I need to figure out what proportions I want to use.
Okay, I put my mask on to measure out the soda ash because since I have a mask, I may as well wear it when dealing with powders, and that's what I recommend doing. I just have 8 cups of warm tap water, and I'm adding to it half an ounce or about 14 grams of soda ash. In the past, I've done like 1 to 2 ounces in 16 cups, and I don't think we need quite that much water, and so I think that this should work well. And so let's put the yarn back in, and now I can absolutely take off my mask. But I'm going to soak all of our yarn in here maybe for about 20 minutes. It probably doesn't even need that long, but that's what I'm going to go and do.
Now, I do have a recommendation from one of Jacquard's chemists that when dyeing a wool cellulose blend with fiber reactive dyes, the best thing to probably do to not damage the wool is to use it like an acid dye. Use it with acid instead of making a more basic solution like we're going to be doing now with the soda ash. But Something that would be a little bit less of a high pH would be baking soda. And so at some point in the future, I'll try on a wool cotton blend to use baking soda to dye that maybe, but we'll see. I mean, I know that the soda ash does affect the texture here a little bit of the wool content, but we're still gonna go for it and see what we end up with. Now, historically, I've observed that when you dye wool with tie-dye, so with like a premixed tie-dye kit that has soda ash in it or something, you end up getting a less vibrant color on the wool than you do on the cotton, which is interesting. And then obviously if you were to dye something with cotton in it with acid dyes, maybe you'd get a little bit of staining, but all the color would rinse out. And so that's something that we've definitely played around with in the past. And so my hypothesis today is that even though I'm planning to use a more random technique, I think that the final color will be less saturated on our wool cotton blend than it's going to be on the 100% cotton. But I'm going to go through and pick out some colors. I think I want to go with pink and yellow and play around with that. And originally I thought I was going to do something hand painted, but I'm now feeling more like, you know what? I want to do a technique that feels very, very me and sort of apply the colors a little bit like randomly, not quite aiming for speckles, but more like splotchy and random, because I feel like that's very me and I want to create something that feels like what I might create on wool yarn, right? So that's what we're gonna do. The two colors I have settled on are fuchsia red and lemon yellow. This still has a seal on it. I've never used this color. And the main reason why I'm sticking with this particular palette is that I know turquoise can bleed a lot, and all the blues I have some turquoise in it. And I also have a very limited fiber reactive dye palette. So if you have some favorite fiber reactive dye colors that you think that I should have in my arsenal, please let me know down in the comments. But yeah, after these two, I definitely have turquoise. I think I have grape and like nightshade and raven, and then royal blue. And I think that that's it. Those are all the fiber reactive dyes that I have. So once the approximate 20 minutes are up, I'm gonna go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we'll set up to dye our yarn. And then I'll probably toss that Cotton yarn, and actually I have a yarn mop. Oh, maybe I should bring the yarn mop over. I'm gonna pop my gloves back on. I'm like, oh, I forgot about her. I have a skein of Asperitas, which is from Nomad and is 50% recycled wool, 50% tencel. And rather than using like a skein of Stroll or Swish as our yarn mop today, I thought that this guy could be our yarn mop. It's also a 50-50 wool cellulose fiber blend. And so we're gonna soak it and we'll have it off camera and I'll wipe my gloves onto it throughout the dyeing process. All right, I'm gonna take the Asperitas and we're gonna stick this into just like a aluminum pan that'll be off to the side. And then our other two other two bases, I'm gonna squeeze out most of the liquid and I'm gonna popping them into a catering steam pan that I'll move on to camera momentarily. All right, and the Asperitas is just off camera. And so my plan is to move things around even more. Is to just spread out the yarn a little bit, and then I'll put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we can start adding color.
Is it weird that I'm nervous? Ooh, look how vibrant this looks. The reason why I am a little bit nervous as I bring in these colors and try to kind of have it swatched. First, we're dealing with the powder, and then we'll kind of try to work it in a little bit. But it's weird that I get so nervous when it comes to fiber reactive dyes, because, I mean, it's a dye powder, just like acid dye powder, but for some reason, I am so afraid of it creating a mess and staining a bunch of things. And I don't have a good answer as to why. Maybe it's because from growing up with cut-eye kits, I was always afraid of the staining. Ooh, this is super bright. Now, I will say as I'm tapping it in, it's not all dissolving super fast. I still see some like dry dye powder on here in different segments. Let me zoom you in. But so you can kind of see, it almost looks like a little bit of chalk in some of those sections. And I have a feeling it'll dissolve eventually, but we don't have a ton of liquid in the yarn. So we'll see. All right, now I don't know what to expect from Fuchsia Red. I probably bought this so that way I would be able to do some color mixing at some point. So just a little bit there and there. And so I do have some dye on my fingertips, and so I'm taking my thumb, ooh, and I'm patting it in on one skein, and then my finger, pat it in over on the other. That is really, really pretty. It's super vibrant and great. I'm happy because I think with this yellow, the fuchsia, this is definitely a fuchsia, and the blue, we'll be able to do some color mixing. And I do have some embroidery thread. I should be careful though, because I think a little bit of this sort of pinkish red color goes a long way. And I know that to some extent these colors are going to alternate on our yarn just because of the nature of using two colors, but I hope, especially once we flip and dye the other side, that we'll get some blending of them as well. And clearly, you know, we aren't necessarily adding the same amount of each color onto each yarn base. I think I'll bring in some more liquid to help like spread these out, but yeah, right now the levels of color feel very similar across these two yarn bases. So I'm gonna go get my turkey baster and grab some liquid. This is about 45 milliliters, at least for now, of our Presoak. And maybe I'll do one more set. Just so that way I can have a little bit more liquid, which will just help me squish some of these colors and help them spread a little bit more. And I likely will grab more later on, but you can see now I'm going down the yarn and squishing it, which is like going to push the colors into some other. I will say that the woolen cotton feels like it's more absorbent and it's easier to like push those dyes through. It's a lot softer. All right, we're going to flip this over. So one of the reasons why I dye this cotton boucle a lot of times for my 100% cotton version of whatever it is I'm doing is that, I don't know, I find that it soaks up water better than some similar colors. Now I am observing a little bit of fallout on the counter, but that could have been because of the, oh my gosh, my mind is completely blanking. It could have been because of the way that like I had to remove the thing on the cap, so we could have had a little bit of powder on the cap. Okay, we're adding a lot of yellow. Then we're going to try to work this through. It's okay if there'll be some white left behind, but I feel like I've done so much blue and purple, and over the years, very little orange. Oh, but I can already tell that this yellow and the way that it's blending with the pink is gorgeous. But notice how, I mean, the bare yarn, I want to look at that again because the colors feel so much more vibrant on the cotton blue clay and a little bit muddier on the woolen cotton. And I feel like their colors Because like the bare yarn here is feeling darker to me. But I don't know if they felt that different earlier. So editing Rebecca will pop up a picture so we can see. Okay, and we're going to be a lot softer with this. Because I've done so many videos where I've tried to speckle on cotton and trying to find the right dyes to create speckles. And that's really fun, but ultimately, this more patchier kind of colorway is something that I love creating on wool. I just typically use more than 2 colors. And so that's why I'm intentionally trying to blend these colors out a bit, because I don't have that many colors to work with or play with. And I think I will bring over some more liquid in a moment, because I think that helps. I have a whole cupful of water from our pre-soak. I'm just sort of adding this on. I have never tried to do low immersion, really, with cotton, not in the same way. So many years ago, oh, this is so pretty, I did a project where I looked at like heat versus time versus vinegar when dyeing yarn with a tie-dye kit. And through that experiment, I found that having like cotton yarn sit for 24 hours gave a very similar ultimate color payoff as steam setting it for 30 minutes. And so I thought that was super interesting. But part of me is like, oh, I need to work these colors through even more. But part of me is also like, no, these are great. I think I might add just a little bit more yellow and have that be it. The other thing that keeps me from dyeing a lot of cotton fiber, just in general, is the fact that, like, after the fact, washing it takes up so much time. And I'm not a huge fan of that. It's no surprise, if you've been watching my content for a while, that the washing step is my least favorite out of everything. So, that should not come as a surprise, but I think that this is so pretty and so fun. Okay, I need to go set up a steamer basket, and so I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, the steamer basket isn't hot yet, but I'm going to add our yarn, which is wet but not dripping. And I think for good measure, I'm going to steam set for 45 minutes. Why not? That is not the right lid. That's the right lid. 45 minutes. We still have a lot of undissolved color in our pan. So in comes our yarn mop, which is beautiful and super subtle. So I'm just literally wiping up this leftover dye onto our mop, and then once the steamer basket frees up, we'll go ahead and steam set this, which is a very soft, beautiful kind of pastel colorway so far, and I'm really loving it. So there we go. It has been 45 minutes, and we are going to remove our yarn and set it aside so it can cool completely. Okay, we do have some color that drips down to the bottom, and you can see we have a tiny bit of color here on the pan as well. Now, I did notice staining that we have on the catering steam pan that we used for the dyeing process. So that is a downside to this, but I'm gonna steam set this yarn mop. We'll wash this skein completely off camera. And once this yarn cools off, then we'll go ahead and wash it.
but the color that dripped down isn't surprising or anything. Fiber reactive dyes don't exhaust completely on cotton, and so there's going to be washing. That's just the way this type of dye works. This is why sometimes I don't like fiber reactive dyes. I can't believe it stained my stainless steel pan, which, to be fair, has some discoloration from years of use over the heat, but like, it's just not budging, and it's not coming off on my fingers or anything. I've been scrubbing it with soap. So, yeah, I think that little things like this contribute to my feeling with fiber reactive dyes. Certainly, I don't want to stain my sink. And now, our yarn is still a little warm, but let's start. Oh my goodness! Check this out. Look at what the soda ash did to the foil. It almost like did something to it. It really changed something about it. I mean, like, this is so odd, but you could see like the twist, and it's like way more pitted. I mean, acid definitely eats at aluminum foil, but maybe soda ash does as well. Maybe the heat also had something to do with it, but that is so funny because you could just see like the twist of the boucle. Well, that pan's getting recycled, and let's go back to our yarn where I'm adding water and a squirt of dish soap right away. Now you can see that there is a lot of yellow coming out here, and orange from our pink. That's to be expected. I really hope I'm not going to be staining my sink. That would make me really unhappy. Yeah. But anytime I feel like I've stained my sink with dye, I really haven't. Anytime I've thought that that's happened, things have been fine and it's come off eventually. So I'm optimistic. Now, I believe I tested with about back staining once, and I don't know if I just used Synthropol or if I also used dish soap, but I didn't see a huge difference in Synthropol versus dish soap. I do think that this color is nice and bright. I wonder if the color in the yarn is going to feel as bright. It's definitely, maybe I'm still feeling some brightness here. I know the sun is a bit in the way. But even now, and it was when it was dyeing, but our woolen cotton yarn definitely feels more muted to me. But the boucle still feels rather bright. Trying to do a number of these initial rinses. A couple times I've tried putting cotton, like tying it up with a bunch of zip ties, putting it in like or rubber bands, putting it in a laundry safe bag, and then putting it through the washing machine. But the cotton boucle, which I believe I've done that to the cotton boucle in the past, but technically that is a hand wash yarn. But I think what I'm going to do now is, we still got soap in here. I'm going to fill this up all the way and let it soak for a while. Because other thing to consider as we're dealing with the color bleeding, we dyed this yarn with straight dye powder, which means that there might have been still some undissolved dye powder on here. And so that also could be part of the bleeding rinse fun that comes with this part of any kind of tie-dye process. But at least with a shirt, you can then like wash it in the washing machine. The bleeding is definitely getting better though. And I still see yellow, like the pinks that have come out haven't overtaken that. So I am going to wash my hands and just leave this in here to soak for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll continue washing. Let's get back to washing. Oh, sometimes I wonder if I should just take the yarn outside and spray with a hose. Even though it's like early June, mid-June, I still have not set up the hose. Texturally, I don't notice like a big change in any of the yarn. It all feels extremely cottony. But where I noticed a difference, and not necessarily the wool and cotton, but with the Asperitas in the past, is that I felt a difference when I compared the types of yarn to each other that were dyed only in acid dyes and that were dyed in both. But we're definitely seeing a lot less color. That is great. All right, I'm gonna start washing this off camera. I have no idea if doing the soak helps. If it helps more of the dye come out or what. But I will pop back in after we've washed it for a while. And honestly, I mean, maybe I won't pop back in. So maybe I'll just wash this a few more times, put it through the spin dryer, and then hang it up to dry. Man, that's looking so clear. Like there's barely any color now. Oh, this is great. Not having turquoise is awesome. All right. Yeah, we'll look at the fish dry yarn in a moment.
Please excuse my lack of voice as we head into these conclusions. I tried to wait as long as I could for it to recover, but tomorrow is the kids' last day of school, so we're gonna try to do this now. So here we have our 100% cotton yarn, the woolen cotton yarn, and then our yarn mop, which is the 50-50 wool tencel. But I'm gonna set the mop aside for now. Let's take a closer look at 100% cotton versus the wool cotton blend. The colors are much more vibrant on our 100% cotton. They're more muted, less saturated, and less bright on the wool cotton blend. And this is likely because our dyeing conditions are optimized for dyeing cellulose fibers and not wool. And so that wool content isn't going to absorb as much color, resulting in an overall more muted feeling yarn. And when I'm looking at the little screen on my camera while recording, the difference doesn't feel as stark as it feels in person right now. The woolen cotton yarn still feels very cottony to me. It's again not the super softest yarn in the world, but it's perfectly reasonable and structured like cotton. I don't think I have another skein to compare it to, but I don't think that the texture is worse off. I am amazed that we used so much pink and yellow on our yarn and ended up with so little orange overall. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. There's certainly more golden aspects to some of the yellow, but the colors didn't spread too much, and I think that this powder application on the cotton worked really well and is something I would like to explore more of in the future. Finally, we have our Asperitas, the Nomad yarn. And this I do have another skein to compare it to. And I would say that this treatment with a little bit of dye and not a super prolonged soak or boil with the soda ash, it feels very, very similar to me, which is a good thing. And I mean, our yarn mop is less saturated than the other yarn, but that's to be expected. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching this video and suffering through my voice. It's a few days later and my voice has returned. Wahoo! One other point that I wanted to make while I'm editing this is that the woolen cotton doesn't necessarily feel that heathered. It feels a little bit more muted, a little bit less bright, but this is a character that we felt earlier in the whole process when even the yarn was wet, and that's because the bare yarn is a little bit deeper. But I have a feeling if I was going to go and over dye this now with acid dyes and vinegar, then the differences that we would see in the end would pop a little bit more. But we don't need to do that because this is still a beautiful yarn in its own right.
And now I would like to give a huge shout out and thank you to the ChemKnits Fiber patrons, including Karen Siegel, Jessica Parco, Bernadette Crum, Don Jans, Tamara Spanas, Michelle Martin, and the rest of the names you see on the screen right now. Patreon is a really great platform where fans of content creators can help support them and get some cool perks in return. Some of the perks I offer over on Patreon include early access to the Dyepot PS series, a Patreon newsletter that comes out every month, and polls to help vote and shape the direction of this Dyepot PS series. I really appreciate the support from all of my patrons and the courage you give me as I do things that otherwise I sometimes delay a little bit further. It's like a great nudge to get me to play more with cotton and fiber reactive dyes. But don't worry, I do have more fiber reactive dyes content coming out this summer, and honestly, by the time this video is publicly available, that might actually be up now. So please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. And now we'll step back to my poor hoarser voice.
Thankfully, the lost voice is the worst of all the symptoms that I had with this cold, and, well, knock on wood, that that's gonna be the end of it and my voice comes back soon. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching this video and putting up with my mysterious, much lower voice for these conclusions. I'm so sorry if this was really hard to listen to, but I wanted this Dyepot PS episode to come out according to schedule, and so I needed to film these conclusions. I do have a fun idea that might involve one of my kids narrating a whole video for me that I film, maybe like time-lapse without me talking, and then write a script and let one of my kids read it. I have no idea if I'll actually do that or if they'll be game for it, but the idea makes me giggle, and so I think I might try. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. And if you want me to dye more cotton yarn, comment below. I always need to dye more cotton. I need to play with these fiber reactive dyes more. And I do have some yarn that I've had soaking for hopefully what's not too long in Soad Ash. But we're going to try to dye that, and maybe we'll try to do a rainbow with fiber reactive dyes. We'll see. Thank you so much for watching.